Ava was at home burning up with fever, and Grace had just done something she swore she'd never do. She stole $8.23 short, and she walked out of that drugstore like a criminal. Grace Caldwell's hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. The pharmacy bag felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds inside her purse, even though it only held one small bottle of antibiotics. Her 6-year-old daughter was very sick. Thank you so much for joining me today, whether you're new here or you've been riding this journey with me. Before we dive in, please hit that subscribe button because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in this story. The South Bronx wind cut through her thin coat as she stumbled down the icy sidewalk, each step heavier than the last. Snow crunched under her worn-out boots. 2 blocks away from the pharmacy, she stopped under a street lamp that buzzed and flickered like it was struggling to stay alive, just like her. She pulled the white paper bag from her purse and stared at it. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, words from years ago when Grace was just a kid herself. You can't build your girl's future on mistakes, baby. Do what's right, even when it hurts. Tears froze on her cheeks. She turned around. Grace trudged back through the snow, clutching the medicine, rehearsing an apology she didn't know how to say. The guilt was crushing her chest, making it hard to breathe. When she pushed through the drugstore doors, warmth hit her face, but shame hit harder. The young clerk at the counter looked up, confused. I took this, Grace said, her voice barely a whisper. She set the bag down like it was evidence at a crime scene. I'm so sorry. I'll pay tomorrow, I promise. Payday is in the morning. My daughter needs it tonight, and I didn't know what else to do. The clerk blinked, unsure what to say, her finger hovering over the phone. The fluorescent lights hummed. Grace braced herself for the police, for handcuffs, for the final collapse of everything she'd been barely holding together. Then a voice cut through the silence. Deep. Calm. Dangerous. Put it on my account. Grace spun around. A man stood near the doorway, snowflakes melting on the shoulders of his black cashmere coat. He wasn't tall, but he filled the room anyway. Dark eyes. Sharp jawline. The kind of face you see in news articles about powerful people, the ones who smile at charity galas while the city whispers their real name in fear. Luca Rossi. If you're feeling this story already, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you think Grace should do, and share this with someone who loves a story that hits different. Grace's heart pounded. She didn't know who he was, not really, but she knew men like him didn't just walk into corner drugstores at midnight for cough drops. Add something for the child's fever, he said to the clerk, sliding a platinum card across the counter like it meant nothing, like her entire crisis was pocket change. You don't have to do this, Grace stammered. He looked at her, not with pity, but with something she couldn't name. Something almost like recognition. How old is your daughter? 6. He nodded once, a shadow crossing his face so fast she almost missed it. Then make sure she sees 7. The clerk rang it up. Grace stood frozen, ashamed and relieved and confused all at once. She mumbled a thank you that didn't feel like enough. When she turned to leave, she expected him to disappear like some kind of ghost. But he didn't. He followed her outside. The snow was falling harder now, thick and heavy, coating the streets in white. Grace hugged the pharmacy bag to her chest, the medicine she'd almost lost now safely hers because a stranger decided to be kind. Or so she thought. You always that honest? He asked. She stopped, looked back at him. Snowflakes caught in his dark hair. I'm trying to be. It doesn't fix much. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes trying is all that's left. Grace should have walked away. Should have said thank you one more time and disappeared into the night. But the storm was picking up, the wind howling between buildings, and she still had 6 blocks to walk in boots with holes in the soles. Let me give you a ride, he said. Before the storm buries you. She refused. Twice. But when a gust of wind nearly shoved her into a snowbank, she heard herself say okay. She climbed into the warmth of his car, a sleek black Maserati that smelled like leather and money, and wondered if she just made the best decision of her life or the worst. What happens when a desperate mother crosses paths with a man whose kindness might be covering up something far more dangerous? Can one act of mercy save them both, or will it drag her into a world she was never meant to see? Don't go anywhere, because what comes next will leave you speechless." The car ride was silent except for the hum of the engine and the scrape of wipers across the windshield. Grace kept her hands in her lap, fingers twisted together, staring out at the blurred streetlights. She could feel Luca's eyes on her, quick glances between watching the road. She didn't know what to say to a man like him. Didn't know what he wanted from her. Men who drove cars that cost more than her entire life didn't just help people like her for no reason. "Where do you work?" he asked. "Nowhere," she said quietly. "They cut my hours at the diner 3 weeks ago. Then they shut it down completely last Monday." She didn't tell him the rest. Didn't tell him how she'd been applying everywhere, how she'd sold her laptop, her grandmother's necklace, even Ava's baby clothes she'd been saving. Didn't tell him that tonight's missing $8.23 was the difference between surviving and drowning. Luca's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. He pulled up in front of her building, a crumbling 5-story walk-up with graffiti on the door and a broken buzzer that hadn't worked in 2 years. Grace reached for the door handle, but before she stepped out, he handed her a card. Heavy paper. Embossed letters. "Come by Rossi Enterprises tomorrow," he said. "Say I sent you. We'll find you something." Grace looked at the card, then at him. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the empty cup holder, and for just a second, she saw something crack in his expression. Pain, maybe. Or regret. "Because someone should," he finally said. She climbed out into the cold, clutching the medicine and the business card, and watched the Maserati disappear into the snow. She didn't know if she'd actually go tomorrow. Didn't know if she could trust him. But as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she let herself hope, just a little. Inside, her neighbor Mrs. Chen was sitting with Ava, who was curled up on the couch under 3 blankets, her small face flushed with fever. Grace kissed her daughter's forehead, whispered that Mama got the medicine, and watched Ava's tired eyes flutter open just long enough to smile. That smile was everything. That smile was why Grace had nearly become a thief. Why she'd gotten into a stranger's car. Why she'd do anything, risk anything. If you're a parent, you know that feeling. If you've ever loved someone so much it scared you, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the sparkling skyline, Luca Rossi stood at his floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. He'd left the hospital gala 2 hours ago, where men in $1,000 tuxedos had clapped him on the back and thanked him for his generous donation to the children's cancer ward. They'd toasted him, called him a hero, a saint. They had no idea. Luca's reflection stared back at him in the glass, and he barely recognized the man he'd become. 5 years ago, he'd been different. Softer, maybe. He had a wife, Isabel, a son, Marco. A life that didn't revolve around power and fear and blood money. But cancer didn't care about power. It took Marco anyway, 3 weeks before his 8th birthday. Isabel left 6 months later, couldn't stand to look at Luca anymore. Couldn't stand the way he'd thrown himself into work, into deals that got darker and uglier, into becoming the kind of man people whispered about. He built an empire on that grief. Construction contracts tied to dirty politicians. Real estate bought with laundered cash. Donations that cleaned his name while his associates buried their mistakes in foundation concrete. The Rossi name meant money and influence, but it also meant fear. And tonight, staring at his own ghost in the window, Luca felt every bit of it crushing him. Then he'd seen her, Grace, standing in the snow outside that pharmacy, shaking like a leaf, eyes full of terror and guilt. And when she'd turned around to return what she'd taken, something in him shifted. Something he thought had died with Marco flickered back to life. Honesty. Real, painful, inconvenient honesty. He pulled out his phone and made a call. His right-hand man, Victor, answered on the first ring. "I need you to look into something," Luca said. "A diner that closed down last week. South Bronx. Find out who owned it and why it shut down." Victor paused. "Boss, is there a problem? Just do it." Luca ended the call and finally took a sip of his whiskey. It burned going down, but not as much as the feeling growing in his chest. Guilt, maybe. Or something worse. Because if that diner closing had anything to do with him, If Grace's suffering was connected to his empire, then the kindness he'd shown her tonight wasn't mercy. It was debt. What will Victor find when he digs into that diner? And what will Luca do when he realizes the woman he helped is connected to his own sins? Drop a comment with your thoughts, and make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to get dangerous. Grace stood outside Rossi Enterprises at 8 in the morning, staring up at the glass tower that seemed to slice right through the clouds. She'd left Ava with Mrs. Chen, promised her she'd be back by noon, and taken 2 buses to get here. The business card felt like it was burning a hole in her coat pocket. She'd almost thrown it away 3 times. Almost convinced herself this was a trap, a game, something men like Luca Rossi played with people like her for sport. But Ava needed food. Needed a home that didn't have mold creeping up the bathroom walls. Needed a mother who could actually provide. Grace pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. Women in designer suits clicked past on heels that cost more than Grace's rent. She walked up to the reception desk, feeling every stare, every judgment. The receptionist looked her up and down, taking in her thrift store coat and scuffed boots. "Can I help you?" The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here to see Mr. Rossi. He told me to come by." The receptionist's expression shifted to barely concealed amusement. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he gave me this." Grace slid the card across the marble counter. The woman picked it up like it might be contaminated, then her face changed. She picked up the phone, whispered something Grace couldn't hear, then hung up and painted on a professional smile. "Someone will be right down." 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been carved from ice. Tall, blonde, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Grace made in 6 months. Her eyes were cold and sharp as she approached. "I'm Vanessa Crane, Mr. Rossi's executive assistant." She didn't offer her hand. "Follow me." They rode the elevator in silence to the 23rd floor. Vanessa's jaw was tight, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against her leather portfolio. Grace could feel the hostility radiating off her in waves. The doors opened into an office that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Sleek furniture. And there, standing by the window in a charcoal suit, was Luca. He turned, and for just a second, his expression softened. "You came. You said you'd find me something," Grace said, hating how small her voice sounded. If you're wondering whether Grace can really trust Luca, you're not alone. Smash that like button and drop a comment telling me if you think she's making a mistake. Vanessa cleared her throat. "Mr. Rossi, your 9 o'clock is in 10 minutes. The merger briefing." "Cancel it," Luca said, not taking his eyes off Grace. Vanessa's face went rigid. "Sir, this is the Henderson deal. We've been working on it for 6 months. Then they can wait another day." Luca finally looked at his assistant, and the temperature in the room dropped. "That'll be all, Vanessa." Vanessa's smile was poison. "Of course." She turned on her heel and left, but not before shooting Grace a look that promised trouble. Luca gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. Please." Grace sat, feeling out of place, like a stray cat someone had led into a palace. Luca leaned against his desk, arms crossed, studying her with those dark eyes that seemed to see right through her. "I made some calls," he said. "You worked at Rosie's Diner for 3 years. Never missed a shift. Customers loved you. Owner said you were the best waitress he ever had." Grace blinked. "You called my old boss?" "I wanted to know who I was helping." He paused. "The diner closed because the landlord tripled the rent. Forced them out." Grace nodded. "It happened to half the block. Some big development deal." Something flickered across Luca's face. Guilt, maybe. Or recognition. He pushed off the desk and moved to the window, hands in his pockets. "I have an opening in my community outreach division. It's entry-level, but it pays well. Health insurance. Benefits. Child care stipend." Grace's heart hammered. "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city. "Because I can. Because someone should. Because maybe I'm tired of only doing things that destroy." Before Grace could respond, The door burst open. Vanessa stood there, her face a mask of professional concern, but her eyes were triumphant. "Mr. Rossi, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's been an incident." Security found discrepancies in the visitor log. She looked directly at Grace. "Apparently, there's been a theft reported from the executive floor." Luca's expression went cold. "What are you talking about?" "A Cartier pen from your desk drawer. Solid gold. Worth $12,000. Vanessa pulled out her phone, showing him something Grace couldn't see. "Security footage shows only 2 people entered your office this morning. You and her." The air left the room. Grace stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I didn't take anything." Vanessa's smile was thin and sharp. "Then you won't mind if security checks your bag." And just like that, Grace realized she'd walked right into a nightmare. Because powerful people didn't just help broken people out of kindness. They owned them, controlled them, destroyed them when they stopped being useful. And she'd been stupid enough to believe she could be the exception. What did Vanessa plant in Grace's bag? And how far will she go to destroy the woman who caught Luca's attention? Don't go anywhere, because what happens next will shock you. Grace's hands trembled as she opened her purse. She dumped everything onto Luca's desk. Wallet with $7 inside. Ava's inhaler. Crumpled receipts. Chapstick. A broken hair tie. No gold pen. Vanessa's perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. Satisfied. Grace's voice shook with anger and humiliation. Luca stepped between them, his voice quiet but lethal. "Vanessa. My office. Now. Mr. Rossi, I was just trying to protect you from." "Now." The word cut like a blade. Vanessa's mask slipped for just a second, long enough for Grace to see real hatred underneath. Then she smoothed her expression and walked into the hallway. Luca followed, but not before turning to Grace. "Wait here. Please." Through the glass walls, Grace watched them argue. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read Vanessa's body language. Defensive. Angry. Desperate. Luca's face was stone, his gestures sharp and controlled. Finally, Vanessa stormed off toward the elevators, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. Luca came back in, his jaw tight. "I apologize. That was unacceptable." "She wanted to humiliate me," Grace said. "She wanted to control me." He sat on the edge of his desk, suddenly looking exhausted. "Vanessa's worked for me for 4 years. She's efficient, ruthless, and she thinks that gives her ownership over my decisions. Does it? Not anymore." He looked at Grace, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Something dangerous and electric. "The job is still yours if you want it. But I need you to understand something. This company, my world, it runs on fear and loyalty. People here don't trust kindness because kindness is usually a weapon. If you work for me, there will be others like Vanessa. Others who think you're a threat just because I chose to help you." Grace thought about Ava. About the overdue rent notices stuffed under her mattress. About the fact that her daughter deserved a life that didn't involve choosing between medicine and food. "When do I start?" A smile ghosted across Luca's face. "Real, this time. Monday. I'll have HR draw up the paperwork." He walked her down to the lobby himself, which apparently was unheard of based on the stares they got. In the elevator, surrounded by polished chrome and awkward silence, Grace found herself studying his reflection. The hard lines of his face. The shadows under his eyes. The way he carried himself like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be light. "The diner that closed," she said suddenly. "Rosie's. You asked about the development deal that killed it." Luca's reflection stiffened. What was the developer's name? He was quiet for 3 floors. Then, so soft she almost missed it, Rossi Development Group. The elevator doors opened. Grace stepped out into the lobby, her stomach twisting. She turned back to look at him, and the guilt on his face told her everything she needed to know. "You destroyed my life," she whispered. "And then you saved it." "Grace, I didn't know." The doors started to close. She didn't stop them. That night, Grace sat in her tiny apartment with Ava asleep beside her, staring at the business card she should have thrown away. The man who'd shown her kindness was the same man who'd taken her job, her security, her future. And now he was offering it all back like he had the right to play God with her life. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please let me explain. Tomorrow. There's more you need to know about what happened to that diner. About who I really am. And about the people who are going to come after you now that you're connected to me. Grace stared at the message until her vision blurred. She should run. Should take Ava and disappear before whatever darkness lived in Luca Rossi's world swallowed them whole. But she'd been running from poverty her whole life, and it always caught up. Maybe it was time to run towards something instead. She texted back one word. Where? If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button right now because things are about to get even more intense. Drop a comment telling me if Grace is brave or foolish, and share this with someone who loves a story that keeps them guessing. The address Luca sent wasn't his office. It was a small Italian cafe in a neighborhood Grace had never been to, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread that made your mouth water. He was already there when she arrived, sitting in the back corner, looking out of place in his expensive suit among the working-class families eating Sunday breakfast. He stood when she approached. Thank you for coming. She didn't sit right away. Tell me the truth. All of it. He gestured to the chair. She sat. And Luca Rossi, a man who commanded empires, looked almost afraid. 3 years ago, I bought a city block in the South Bronx, he began. It was supposed to be low-income housing. Affordable units for families who needed them. But my investors wanted luxury condos instead. Higher profit margins. I was grieving my son, drowning in work to forget, and I signed off on plans I never actually read. He stared at his untouched coffee. By the time I realized what we were building, the evictions had already started. Rosie's Diner. The laundromat. The bodega where families had shopped for 20 years. All gone. Because I was too broken to pay attention. Grace felt her anger warring with something else. Something that felt dangerously like understanding. You still did it, she said. Grief doesn't erase that. No, it doesn't. He finally looked at her. But I can't undo it. I can only try to do better now. Starting with you. I don't want to be your charity case. You're not. His eyes were intense, honest in a way that made her chest tight. You're my accountability. My reminder that every signature I put on a contract affects real people. Real families. The waitress brought menus. They ordered without looking, the tension between them thick and complicated. Grace wanted to hate him. It would be easier. Safer. But the man sitting across from her wasn't the monster she'd built in her head. He was just broken in different ways than she was. Tell me about Ava, he said quietly. And somehow, Grace did. Told him about the pregnancy that scared her at 19. About Ava's father who left before she was born. About working double shifts while finishing her GED. About every small victory and crushing defeat that had led her to that pharmacy 2 nights ago. Luca listened like her words mattered. Like she mattered. She sounds like you, he said when she finished. Strong. Stubborn. Honest even when it costs her. She's everything, Grace whispered. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Pain raw and deep. Marco was everything to me too. Past tense. The worst 2 words a parent can say. Before Grace could respond, her phone rang. Mrs. Chen. She answered, and the panic in her neighbor's voice made her blood run cold. Grace, you need to come home. Now. Ava's fever is back and she's asking for you and there are men outside. Black cars. They've been sitting there for an hour watching your building. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, make sure you hit that like button and tell me in the comments what you think is about to happen. Grace's face went white. She stood so fast her chair scraped. I have to go. Luca was already on his feet, throwing cash on the table. I'm coming with you. No. This is exactly what you said would happen. People coming after me because I'm connected to you. Which is exactly why you're not facing them alone. They ran to his car. The drive to Grace's apartment took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Luca drove with the focus of a man who'd navigated danger before. his jaw set, one hand on the wheel and the other making calls in rapid Italian that sounded like orders. Commands. Threats. When they pulled up to her building, Grace's stomach dropped. 2 black SUVs were parked out front, windows tinted, engines running. Men in dark suits leaned against them, waiting. "Stay in the car," Luca said. "Like hell. That's my daughter up there." She was out before he could stop her, running toward the building entrance. One of the men stepped in front of her, blocking her path. He was huge, with a scar running down his cheek and eyes that had seen things that would make most people flinch. "You need to come with us," he said. His voice was thick with an accent Grace couldn't place. "Move," she said, her voice shaking with fear and fury. Luca was beside her in seconds, positioning himself between Grace and the man. His voice dropped to something cold and deadly. "Touch her and you won't make it to your car." The scarred man smiled. "Mr. Rossi, our employer would like a word. Tell Dante I'm not interested in his business anymore." "He's not asking about business. He's asking about her." The man nodded toward Grace. Word travels fast when the Charity King takes a personal interest in someone. Makes people curious. Makes them wonder what she knows. What she's worth. "She's worth more than you'll ever understand," Luca said. "Now move, or I make a call that ends with you disappearing." The tension was a living thing, coiling tighter. Grace's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Somewhere above them, Ava was waiting. Sick. Scared. Wondering where her mother was. The scarred man studied Luca for a long moment, then stepped aside. "This isn't over. Dante doesn't forget debts. And you just created a new one." Luca took Grace's hand, his grip strong and steady, and pulled her into the building. They took the stairs 2 at a time, Grace's breath coming in gasps that had nothing to do with exertion. When they burst into her apartment, Mrs. Chen was holding Ava, who was crying and flushed with fever. "Mama!" Ava whimpered. Grace scooped her daughter into her arms, pressing kisses to her hot forehead, whispering promises she didn't know if she could keep. "It's okay, baby. Mama's here." Luca stood in the doorway of her tiny, falling-apart apartment, looking at Grace and Ava like they were something precious and breakable. And for the first time since his son died, he felt something stronger than grief. He felt purpose. "We need to move you," he said quietly. "Both of you. Tonight. It's not safe here anymore." Grace looked up at him, her daughter in her arms, her whole life balanced on the edge of a cliff. Run away with a man she barely knew, a man whose world was clearly more dangerous than she'd imagined. Or stay and risk whatever Dante, whoever he was, had planned for her. "Who is Dante?" she asked. Luca's expression went dark. "Someone I used to work with. Someone I thought I could walk away from." He looked at Ava, then back at Grace. "He runs half the organized crime in this city, and if he thinks you're valuable to me, he'll use you to get what he wants." "Which is what?" "My loyalty. My silence. My empire." Luca stepped into the apartment, closing the door behind him. "I've been trying to go legitimate for 2 years. Clean money, clean deals. Dante sees it as betrayal. And he doesn't forgive betrayal. So helping me put a target on my back." "Yes." Grace held Ava tighter. The little girl had stopped crying, her eyes drifting closed against her mother's shoulder. Grace thought about running, always running, never safe, never settled. Thought about the kind of life Ava deserved versus the kind of life Grace kept giving her. Then she looked at Luca, really looked at him, and saw a man trying to climb out of his own darkness. Maybe they could climb together. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll go." What dangerous game has Grace just agreed to play? And how far will Luca go to protect the woman and child who've given him a reason to fight for redemption? Don't you dare go anywhere, because the next part will leave you breathless. Luca moved them that night to a safe house in Brooklyn, a brownstone tucked behind iron gates with security cameras on every corner. It was beautiful in a cold, impersonal way. Granite countertops and leather furniture that had never known the warmth of a real family. Ava fell asleep in a guest bedroom bigger than their entire apartment, and Grace stood in the doorway watching her daughter breathe, wondering what kind of life she'd just dragged her into. "You should get some rest," Luca said from behind her. Grace didn't turn around. How do you live like this? Always looking over your shoulder. Always waiting for the next threat. You get used to it. Then, quieter, or you forget what peace feels like. She finally looked at him. He'd taken off his suit jacket, loosened his tie, and he looked human for the first time. Tired. Scared, maybe. Real. Thank you, she said, for protecting us. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. He was right. The next morning, Victor arrived with news that made Luca's face go stone cold. They sat in the study while Grace made Ava breakfast, and through the closed door she could hear their voices rising. She's a plant, Victor said, his voice sharp. I did the background check like you asked. Grace Caldwell didn't exist before 7 years ago. No birth certificate, no school records, nothing. The identity is clean, professional. The kind of clean that costs money. That's impossible, Luca said. I'm telling you what I found. Or didn't find. Victor slapped a folder on the desk. And there's more. 2 days after you brought her into the office, the FBI contacted me. Routine questions about our community outreach program. Asking specifically about new hires. They mentioned her by name. Grace's blood turned to ice. She stood frozen in the hallway, Ava's sandwich half made on the counter. You think she's working with the feds? Luca's voice was dangerous now. I think it's one hell of a coincidence. Beautiful woman, sob story, shows up exactly when Dante's been pressuring you to come back into the fold. Maybe she's bait. Maybe she's wearing a wire right now. Get out. Boss, you need to think clearly about this. I said get out. Footsteps. The door opened. Victor emerged, saw Grace standing there, and smiled. It wasn't kind. Morning, Miss Caldwell. Or should I say whatever your real name is. He left. The door slammed. Grace's hands shook as she walked into the study. Luca stood with his back to her, staring out the window, every muscle in his body tense. I heard what he said, Grace began. Did you? His voice was ice. It's not true. I don't know what he's talking about. My name is Grace Caldwell. I've lived in the Bronx my whole life. I've never worked for the FBI or anyone else. He turned, and the look on his face broke something in her chest. Because it wasn't anger. It was doubt. Then explain the records. I can't. I don't know why there's nothing there. Maybe my mom never registered my birth. Maybe the hospital lost the paperwork. I don't know. But I'm not lying to you. Everyone lies to me, Grace. It's how they survive in my world. I'm not in your world, she shot back. You dragged me into it. The words hung between them like shattered glass. Ava appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, sensing the tension. Mama, are you fighting? Grace forced a smile. No, baby. We're just talking. Go finish your breakfast, okay? Ava looked between them with those two wise eyes, then shuffled back to the kitchen. The moment she was gone, Luca's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went white. What? Grace whispered. He turned the phone toward her. It was a photo. Grace, sitting in a coffee shop 3 months ago, talking to a man in a suit. The man's FBI badge was visible on his belt. The message below read, "Your new girlfriend has friends in interesting places. Maybe you should ask her about Agent Torres. Or should I?" It was from Dante. Grace stared at the photo, her mind racing. 3 months ago. Coffee shop. Then it hit her. That's Officer Torres, she said quickly. He came to the diner after there was a break-in. He took my statement. We ran into each other a week later and he bought me coffee to ask follow-up questions about what I saw. That's it. That's the whole story. Luca studied her face like he was searching for cracks. You don't believe me, she said. After everything, you actually think I'm some kind of spy. I don't know what to believe, he said, and the honesty in his voice was worse than accusation. In my world, people use connection as currency. They find your weakness and exploit it. And right now, you and Ava are my biggest weakness. Then let us go. Grace's voice broke. We'll disappear. You'll never have to see us again. It's too late for that. You're in this now, whether I trust you or not. Dante won't stop just because you leave. So what? I'm your prisoner? You're my responsibility. There's a difference. Before Grace could respond, the window exploded inward. Glass rained down as Luca tackled her to the floor, covering her body with his. Gunshots ripped through the air, splintering wood and shattering picture frames. Grace screamed Ava's name, trying to crawl toward the kitchen, but Luca held her down. Stay down, he commanded, pulling a gun from a drawer she hadn't known was there. More gunshots. Shouting from outside. Then silence, heavy and terrible. Luca was up first, moving low and fast toward the kitchen. Grace followed, her heart in her throat, praying to every god she'd never believed in. Ava was under the table, exactly where Grace had taught her to go during their old neighborhood's frequent shootings. Alive. Unhurt. Terrified. Grace pulled her daughter into her arms, choking on relief and rage. This was supposed to be safe. You said we'd be safe here. Luca's face was carved from stone. He made a call, speaking in rapid Italian, then hung up and looked at Grace with something like resignation. We need to move. Now. This location is compromised. How many safe houses do you have? As many as it takes. He crouched down to Ava's level. Hey, brave girl. We're going on another adventure, okay? Like a game. Ava nodded, too scared to speak. As they rushed to the garage, Luca's phone buzzed again. Another message from Dante. Next time I won't miss. Give me what I want, Luca, or I'll take everything you're trying to protect. Starting with them. You have 24 hours to decide where your loyalty lies. Old family or new. Grace saw the message over his shoulder. What does he want? He wants me to kill someone, Luca said quietly. A witness who's testifying against his operation next week. He thinks if I do it, I prove I'm still one of them. Still loyal. And if you don't, then he kills you and Ava to prove I'm not. Is Grace really an informant, or is she an innocent woman caught in a deadly game? Can Luca choose between his dark past and the family he's starting to love? Keep watching, because what happens next will change everything, and you won't see it coming. They drove through the night, switching cars twice, until they ended up at a hotel under a fake name. Luca had people everywhere. Grace was learning. People who owed him favors, people who feared him, people who'd hide a woman and child without asking questions. Ava finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning, exhausted from fear and confusion. Grace sat by the window, watching the street below, waiting for black SUVs that might never come or might arrive any second. Luca sat across from her, his gun on the table between them, his phone buzzing with messages he kept ignoring. Tell me the truth, Grace said into the silence. Can you actually protect us, or are we just waiting to die? He looked at her with those dark, tired eyes. I don't know. The honesty should have terrified her. Instead, it was almost a relief. There's a charity gala tomorrow night, he said. The mayor will be there, the police commissioner, half the city council. Dante won't make a move in front of that many witnesses. We'll be safe there while I figure out our next step. Our next step, Grace repeated. Like we're a team, aren't we? He leaned forward. I know you don't trust me. I know Victor planted doubt and Dante made it worse. But I need you to hear this. I believe you. About the FBI agent, about everything. Because if you were really working against me, you had a dozen chances to destroy me by now, and you haven't taken any of them. Something warm and dangerous bloomed in Grace's chest. Maybe. The gala was the kind of event Grace had only seen in movies. Crystal chandeliers and champagne towers and women dripping in diamonds that could pay her rent for a decade. Luca had arranged for a designer dress to be delivered to the hotel, deep emerald green that fit her perfectly and made her feel like an imposter. Ava stayed behind with a security team Luca swore he trusted with his life, and Grace had to force herself not to turn the car around 100 times. You look beautiful, Luca said when he saw her. I look like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. He adjusted his tie, uncomfortable in his own tuxedo. Welcome to my world. It's all pretend. They arrived fashionably late, Luca's hand on the small of her back as they entered the ballroom. Heads turned. Whispers started immediately. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was the untouchable Luca Rossi, the man who hadn't been seen with a woman since his wife left, suddenly appearing with a mysterious brunette? If you're loving the drama, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me if you'd survive in Grace's shoes. Vanessa was there, of course, in a blood-red gown, watching them with eyes like a hawk. Victor stood near the bar, his expression unreadable. And in the corner, surrounded by men in expensive suits, was Dante Moretti himself. He was older than Grace expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. When he saw Luca, he raised his champagne glass in a mock toast. "We need to leave," Grace whispered. "We can't. Running now shows weakness. Just stay close to me." They made the rounds. Luca introduced her as a friend, which sparked more whispers. The mayor shook her hand. A city councilwoman asked where she was from. Grace smiled and lied and felt like she was walking through a minefield in heels. Then Dante approached. "Luca, my old friend." He spoke with an accent that made every word sound like a threat. "And this must be the famous Grace. I've heard so much about you." "Have you?" Grace said, keeping her voice steady. "Oh yes. The struggling mother. The honest thief. The damsel who captured our cold king's heart. It's very romantic. Like a fairy tale." He sipped his champagne. Of course, fairy tales usually have dark origins. "Did Luca tell you how you two are really connected?" Luca's hand tightened on Grace's waist. "Dante, don't." "Oh, but she deserves to know the truth." Dante's smile widened. "The development deal that closed her precious diner. Luca says he didn't know, that he was grieving and distracted. But that's not entirely accurate, is it?" Luca's face had gone to stone. "You see, Grace, the order to push through that development, to triple the rents and force out the tenants, didn't come from some faceless investor." Dante stepped closer. "It came from Luca's own right hand. His most trusted associate. The man standing right over there." He pointed to Victor. Grace's world tilted. She looked at Victor, who had the decency to look away. Victor told Luca the neighborhood was blighted, that the people there wouldn't fight back, that it was easy money, Dante continued. And Luca signed off without a second thought. "So when he found you in that pharmacy, when he played the hero, he was really just trying to absolve himself of guilt. You weren't his redemption, darling. You were his therapy." "That's enough," Luca said, his voice deadly quiet. "Is it? Because I think she deserves to know that the man who saved her is the same man who destroyed her. And now he's using her as a shield against me, parading her around like proof that he's changed, when we both know he's still the same ruthless bastard he's always been." Grace couldn't breathe. She looked at Luca, waiting for him to deny it, to tell her Dante was lying. But he didn't. "It's true," Luca said quietly. "Victor recommended the development. I approved it. I knew there would be displaced families. I knew people would suffer. I told myself it was just business." He looked at Grace, and the pain in his eyes was real and raw. "I didn't know one of those people would be you. Didn't know I'd meet you, care about you. But that doesn't change what I did." The ballroom felt like it was spinning. Grace stepped back, away from his touch. "You knew. This whole time. You knew you were the reason I lost everything. Not the whole time. Not at first. But yes, when Victor told me which diner closed, I knew. And you didn't tell me. Because I'm a coward." He said it simply, like a confession. "Because I was afraid if you knew the whole truth, you'd leave, and I'd lose the only good thing that's happened to me in years." Tears burned Grace's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of these people who fed on weakness like sharks. I need air," she whispered. She pushed through the crowd, past the champagne and the whispers and the glittering people who had no idea what real struggle felt like. She found a balcony overlooking the city, the cold night air biting through her thin dress. Luca followed. Of course he did. "Grace, please. Don't." She held up her hand. "Don't apologize. Don't make excuses. Just tell me one thing. If you could go back, if you could make that choice again, would you?" He was quiet for a long moment. I want to say yes. I want to be the man who'd choose morality over money. But I don't know if that man exists. The Luca from 3 years ago cared about one thing: building an empire big enough to forget his pain. He wouldn't have thought twice about your diner. And the Luca standing here now? He wants to be better. He's trying to be better. Because of you. Because of Ava. Because maybe redemption is possible if you fight hard enough for it. Grace wiped her eyes, smudging the makeup that had taken an hour to apply. My whole life, I've had nothing. And the one time someone powerful notices me, helps me, it turns out he's the reason I had nothing in the first place. That's not redemption, Luca. That's just returning what you stole. You're right. His voice cracked. You're absolutely right. And I don't know how to fix it. Don't know how to make up for the damage I've caused. But I know I won't let Dante hurt you. I know I'll burn down everything I've built before I let him touch you or Ava. That has to count for something. Why? Grace demanded. Why does it matter so much? We're nothing to you. Strangers who walked into your life 5 days ago. Because when Marco died, he took every good part of me with him. Luca's confession came out raw and broken. I became something hollow and cruel. Built an empire on that hollowness. And then I saw you, standing in the snow, choosing honesty over survival, and I remembered what it felt like to be human. You reminded me I could still feel something other than grief and greed. Before Grace could respond, gunshots shattered the night. Not outside this time. Inside the ballroom. Screaming erupted, glass breaking, chaos flooding through the open doors. Luca pulled his gun, putting himself between Grace and the danger. Stay behind me. They moved back inside. The ballroom was pandemonium. Guests running, security shouting, and in the center of it all stood Dante, holding a gun to Vanessa's head. She's FBI, Dante announced to the room. Been feeding information to the feds for 6 months. And your precious Victor knew. They've been working together to take down everyone in this room. Victor tried to run. 2 of Dante's men grabbed him, forced him to his knees. Grace's mind reeled. Vanessa was FBI. Victor was cooperating. Which meant the entire investigation into Grace was a setup to distract from the real informant. Luca, Dante called out. You wanted to know who framed your little girlfriend. It was them. Vanessa convinced Victor to plant the false background, to make you doubt her, to push you back into our world where you belong. Luca's gun stayed trained on Dante. Let her go. I will. Right after you make your choice. Kill Victor, prove your loyalty, and I'll let everyone walk out of here alive. Refuse, and I start with Miss FBI here, then work my way to your pretty date. The room held its breath. Luca's hand was steady on his gun, but Grace could see the war raging behind his eyes. Choose who you really are, Luca, Dante said. The kingpin or the charity case. And Grace realized something. Luca couldn't make this choice. Not without losing either his soul or their lives. So she'd have to make it for him. She stepped forward, putting herself between Luca's gun and Dante. What happens when a powerless woman becomes the most powerful person in the room? You won't believe what Grace does next. Don't go anywhere. Grace, get back, Luca hissed. But Grace didn't move. She stared at Dante, her heart hammering, and said the only thing that made sense. You're not going to shoot anyone. Dante's smile faltered. Excuse me. Grace's voice grew stronger. You're not going to shoot an FBI agent in a room full of the city's most powerful people with security cameras recording everything. You're not going to start a massacre that would bring every law enforcement agency in the state down on your head. You're too smart for that. Dante's gun pressed harder against Vanessa's temple. You don't know what I'm capable of. Yes, I do. Grace took another step forward. You're capable of threats. Of intimidation. Of making men like Luca choose between their conscience and their survival. But you're not capable of throwing away your empire for the sake of proving a point. Because that's all this is. A point. You want Luca back under your control, but killing people tonight doesn't accomplish that. It just makes you a target. The room was dead silent. Every eye on Grace, the woman in the emerald dress who shouldn't have had any power but somehow commanded the entire space. Dante's eyes narrowed. "You've got courage. I'll give you that. But courage doesn't stop bullets." "No," Vanessa said suddenly, her voice steady despite the gun at her head. "But backup does." The ballroom doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Dante's men scattered. Some surrendered immediately, hands up. Others tried to run and were tackled within seconds. Dante shoved Vanessa away and turned his gun toward Luca. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me." Everything happened at once. Luca fired. Dante fired. Grace screamed. And then Dante was on the ground, clutching his shoulder, his gun skittering across the marble floor. Luca stood frozen, his gun still raised, a red stain spreading across his left arm. "Luca," Grace rushed to him as FBI agents swarmed Dante. "I'm fine. It's just a graze." He lowered his weapon, letting it fall to the floor. "It's over." Vanessa approached, pulling her FBI badge from inside her dress. She looked at Luca with something like respect. "For what it's worth, you made the right choice. Not shooting Victor. Not playing Dante's game." Luca stared at her. "How long have you been undercover?" 18 months. Victor flipped 6 months ago when we offered him witness protection. We've been building a case against Dante's entire operation. She glanced at Grace. "The background check discrepancies on you were real, by the way. We didn't plant those. But Victor used them to serve his own purpose, to make Luca paranoid and push him toward Dante. We didn't know until tonight." Grace felt dizzy. "So I'm not a ghost? You're very real. Just born in a home birth, never formally registered. It happens more than you'd think." Vanessa almost smiled. "You should probably get a proper birth certificate though. For Ava's sake." Paramedics arrived to treat Luca's arm. Police led Dante away in handcuffs, his silver hair disheveled, his empire crumbling in real time. Victor was escorted out separately, headed for witness protection and a life of looking over his shoulder. Luca found Grace in the chaos. "We need to check on Ava." They left together, slipping out a side entrance while the FBI processed the scene. The drive back to the hotel was quiet, both of them processing everything that had shattered and rebuilt itself in one impossible night. Ava was asleep, safe, guarded by people who'd protected her without question. Grace kissed her daughter's forehead and felt something in her chest finally unclench. If you've been holding your breath this whole story, go ahead and let it out. Drop a comment telling me what you felt, and smash that subscribe button because stories like this are what we do here. In the hallway outside Ava's room, Luca leaned against the wall, exhausted and bleeding and somehow lighter than Grace had ever seen him. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I make it right. All of it." He looked at her. "I'm dismantling the corrupt parts of my business. Selling off the properties we acquired through dirty deals. The South Bronx development. All of it. I'm turning it into what it should have been from the start. Affordable housing. Community centers. Medical clinics. That's a lot of money to give up. I have more than enough. And money built on suffering isn't worth keeping." He reached for her hand, tentative. "I want to name the first clinic after Ava. If that's okay with you." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. "Why?" "Because she gave me hope when I thought I'd run out. Because her mother showed me that real strength isn't power or control. It's choosing to do right even when it costs everything." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking you to forgive me for what I took from you. I'm asking if you'll let me spend however long it takes trying to earn it." Grace thought about the woman she'd been a week ago. Desperate, alone, stealing medicine because she had no other choice. And she thought about the woman she was now. Standing in a luxury hotel, wearing a designer dress, hand in hand with a man who destroyed her life and was now trying to rebuild it. "I don't want to be your charity project," she said. "You're not. You never were." He moved closer. "I want to offer you a real partnership. Not a job working for me, but a position running the community outreach foundation I'm creating. You know that neighborhood. You know what those families need because you were one of them. I have the resources. You have the heart and the knowledge. Together we could actually make a difference. And us. Grace whispered. What are we? Luca smiled, and it was real and warm and full of possibility. Whatever you want us to be. I'm not going to pressure you or rush you. But I'm going to be here, doing the work, trying to be the man you made me want to become. And if someday you decide you can trust me with more than just a partnership, I'll be the luckiest man alive. Grace stood on her toes and kissed him. Soft and quick and full of all the things she couldn't say yet. Consider it a maybe. I'll take a maybe. 3 months later, Grace stood in front of a building in the South Bronx with a ribbon stretched across the door. The sign above read, Ava's Hope Community Health Clinic. Luca stood beside her, his arm around her waist. Ava bounced excitedly, wearing her favorite dress, ready to cut the ribbon with scissors almost as big as she was. The neighborhood had turned out. Families who'd been displaced were starting to move back into the affordable units Luca had built. Rosie from the old diner had reopened in a space Luca provided rent-free for the first 2 years. The bodega was back. The laundromat was humming. The block was alive again. This is because of you, Luca said quietly. All of it. This is because someone chose to do better, Grace corrected. That was you. You made me want to. Ava cut the ribbon, and the crowd cheered. Inside the clinic, doctors and nurses waited to serve families who couldn't afford care anywhere else. Grace had hired most of them herself, had designed the programs, had poured everything she'd learned from a lifetime of struggle into creating something that actually helped. That night, after Ava was asleep in their new apartment, one Luca had bought for them but put solely in Grace's name so she'd never feel trapped or owned, Grace and Luca sat on the couch with glasses of wine and tired smiles. I got a call from the mayor today, Luca said. He wants me to consult on affordable housing initiatives citywide. Are you going to do it? Only if you're my co-consultant. Grace laughed. I went from stealing medicine to advising the mayor. That's insane. That's redemption. He pulled her close. For both of us. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. You know what I realized? What? That night in the pharmacy, when you paid for Ava's medicine, you thought you were saving me. But really, I was saving you. He kissed the top of her head. I know. Months turned into a year. The foundation grew. More clinics opened. More families found homes. Grace's partnership with Luca deepened, in business and in life. He was patient, letting her set the pace, proving every day that he'd changed not just for her but because of her. Ava thrived. Her health improved. She started school in a good district. She called Luca Uncle Luca, and sometimes, when she forgot, just Luca, and he treasured both. On the anniversary of the night they met, Luca took Grace back to that same pharmacy. It was under new ownership now, part of a chain that accepted insurance and offered payment plans. They stood outside in the snow, and he handed her a small box. Inside was a key. What's this? The building next door. It's empty. I thought maybe we could turn it into a women's resource center. Job training, childcare, legal aid. Whatever you think it should be. He smiled. Your vision, my funding. Like always. Grace threw her arms around him, and the key pressed between them felt like a promise. Not just of buildings and programs, but of a future they were building together from the ruins of their pasts. I love you, she said. The first time she'd said it out loud. I love you too. He'd been waiting to hear it, but he'd never pushed. And in the end, she came to him freely, wholly, choosing him the way he'd chosen to change for her. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier than that, more complicated, full of mistakes and consequences and the hard work of becoming better. But it was real. And it was theirs. Years later, when Ava was grown and running the foundation herself, when Grace and Luca had built something that outlasted them, people would tell the story of the Mafia boss and the struggling mother. Some versions made it romantic. Some made it dramatic. But the truth was simpler and more powerful than any story. It was about a man who thought power meant control, learning that real power is choosing compassion. It was about a woman who thought she had nothing, discovering she had everything that mattered. It was about how one moment of kindness, messy and complicated as it was, could change 2 lives and ripple out to change hundreds more. The greatest power any of us have isn't money or influence or control. It's the choice, every single day, to do better. To help when we can. To be honest when it costs us. To build instead of destroy. Grace knew that when she returned that stolen medicine. Luca learned it when he chose to help her. And together, they proved that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about using it to build a better future. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the choices you make and the lives you touch, then it did what it was supposed to do. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear that change is possible, and subscribe because we're just getting started. Drop a comment telling me what this story meant to you. Your words matter. Your story matters. And just like Grace and Luca, you have the power to write a better ending than the one you were given. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.